Hello everyone, welcome to another Patreon voted review. This month's selection is Schildmaid MX, a new horizontal indie shmup created using Unity, and I thought that was really interesting because I've noticed a real trend as of late where more and more shmups are being created using Unity rather than older programs such as Game Maker. And so maybe this is a thing that we will see continue into the future. Maybe Unity is the direction we all need to start moving in. I don't know, but I do notice that it does seem to be really catching on with developers, which is really interesting. And I kind of wish I knew more about Unity just so I could add in some more insights about that. But I did want to make note that it was created with Unity in case anyone in the comments section has any specific insights about the pros of using the engine for the genre. And so the first thing about Schildmaid that I noticed outside of it being created on Unity is the menus and how robust the menus on the first screen are. There's a lot to choose from. I went ahead and went to the settings, and there was a lot to go through with the settings. You could change the scan lines, you could change the screen curvature, you could manually configure buttons. That seems basic, but there are quite a few shmups out there where you can't configure buttons, so I do appreciate that. I think the developer did a really great job having a thorough, strong user interface right from the beginning, so it really gives the game a nice polished feel, which I think a lot of people appreciate, even though it's not something you'd normally think about all that much. The second thing about the game that stood out to me when I first started playing it is the aspect ratio. So this is another horizontal shmup made in full 16:9 aspect ratio. We're seeing more and more shmups abandoning the traditional aspect ratio of 4:3 and going full on 16:9. And I do think this is an interesting change, and a change that is a little bit more complicated for the genre of shmups than it would be for other genres like platformers, going from 4:3 to 16:9. Yes, there are some changes, but it doesn't seem to be a massive shift in the level design or anything. But when it comes to shmups, because you utilize every piece of the screen, unlike a platformer, think about a platformer, you're just on the bottom of the screen like 90% of the time, right? You're going on platforms and everything, but you are sort of pulled down by gravity just the same. But in a shmup, you really do use every pixel of that screen. And so by doubling the entire screen real estate, I think it really fundamentally shifts the way the games play, the way the games feel, the way the levels come together and all that sort of thing. And I've noticed that with newer 16:9 horizontal shmups, so not just Schildmaid, but also stuff like Rolling Gunner, it does seem to be a bit of a struggle on the developer side to fill up the screen or to use the screen to its full effect. And I think the shmup that does this the best, even though it isn't full on 16:9, is Battle Traverse. And the way Battle Traverse handled this was to enlarge the sprites. So your hitboxes are still nice and small, but the sprites are bigger. The bullets are bigger. Everything is magnified, right? But I think that actually really works. And so I would like to see more shmups that do come out in the 16:9 aspect ratio maybe experiment a bit with enlarging the size of the sprites, because otherwise you do sort of fall into this syndrome. And it's not just Schildmaid that has this, but there's other horizontal shmups like R-Type Final 2 or Rolling Gunner even. There are just a lot of really tiny enemies and bullets, and it gives the game a real spaced out, less visceral feel. At least that's my opinion. But anyway, I'll do a whole video maybe in the future about aspect ratios and shmups, but that was something I noticed right away. And the second thing I noticed about the gameplay is that it is very unique and really cool as far as the way the core gameplay of this game works, and not something that I've ran into quite like this in a shmup before. Of course, there are influences, and maybe there's a really obvious influence that I'm missing, but I do want to explain the core mechanics to you all, because otherwise you're going to get a wrong impression. Because I remember when I first fired up the game, being the person that I am, I didn't read the instructions, I didn't read the tutorial, I didn't read any of that. I just started playing. It's just sort of playing it like a normal shmup, and I felt like, this is feeling a little clunky, it's feeling a little underpowered. And then I went back, read the directions, went back, watched the tutorial, and was like, oh, okay, I'm doing this incorrectly. So I want to get this explained right away so you all don't fall into the same trap that I did, which is the game actually wants you to get hit and to use your shield. This is a desirable thing to happen. It isn't like a punishment. So that's something that is really interesting. It reminds me a little bit of maybe an Ikaruga type situation, where what happens, the way this works is that your shield charges, and then when your shield is fully charged, you want to actually get hit by a bullet, and that will activate your shield, and then you run around and you try and point blank everything and collect bullets like you're playing Ikaruga or something like that, and those will power you up and make your ship stronger. And then once your chain runs out, your shield drops, then you actually need to dodge things and be sure not to get hit, and then you let your shield recharge, and then you repeat the cycle over and over again. And in doing that, you also gain your special weapon, which depending on the ship, it's a big powerful attack, whether it's homing missiles or a laser. And then that repeats the cycle as well until you get fully powered up. And you can tell because then when you go into the shield mode, instead of being blue, then we have hit max power. Once you understand this is the way the game plays, everything is going to open up to you and feel much more comfortable, because when I was first playing the game, what I was trying to do is never get hit. I was kind of ignoring the shield mechanic, and the game felt a little funky because I was basically playing it way too underpowered. So once you understand the way the power-up system works and the way the game wants you to play it, those issues will go away, which is very good to know for people who may not be inclined to read instructions or anything like that. The other aspect of the game that I think is very interesting that I sat down and have been scratching my head over for quite a while now is the barrel roll mechanic. So this game is sort of moving away from the bomb mechanic. From what I understand, there is no bomb mechanic in the game. The closest is your shield and your special weapon, but I do not believe there is a formal, press B to bomb, clear the screen, gain invulnerability mechanic. Instead, you have this other maneuver, a barrel roll. And at first it seems like this barrel roll is completely useless other than it looks cool. And I've always wanted to see barrel rolls a la Star Fox integrated into shmups. And so my first instinct when I started playing is, oh shit, this is going to deflect bullets like in Star Fox. So I'd go and fly into a bullet and barrel roll and just get owned. So unfortunately, the barrel roll does not deflect bullets. What it does, from what I understand reading the Shmup Wiki, is it sort of throws off homing missiles and it throws off homing lasers a little bit. Though when I was trying to do that in gameplay, it didn't seem to be all that successful. In the times that I was able to make the barrel roll work, I just could have just avoided the missiles and shots anyway. And so I would say if I were to give some constructive feedback on the barrel roll mechanic, it would be interesting if he did something more with the mechanic, because it feels a little bit underdeveloped. My idea is that in the game there are these beams, and these beams are hella strong, and they can kind of do some nasty stuff in the stage design because they'll lock you into this sort of region. And there are times where it'll lock you into a region and you're just stuck in there and you can see death coming towards you and you're like a little mouse in a cage, you can't get out of it. And so I do think it would be a cool idea if you were able to use this barrel roll mechanic to barrel roll across these beams. But, it'd be a very strict timing, so you can just, spam it. But if you were just to nail that barrel roll perfectly, it'd give you like an invulnerability or like flecked off the beam for a second and you could barrel roll through. Because I cannot tell you how many times I was playing where I just did that and I was like, oh, that's not going to work. But I kept wanting to do that so badly. Maybe it's just playing too much Star Fox. Maybe that's what it is. But I just feel like that mechanic, that barrel roll, is begging to be used for more things than just the homing missiles. It wants another purpose. So I do think if I were to give some constructive feedback on that mechanic, if he could figure out some other use for that barrel roll, I think that would go a long way towards making the mechanic feel a little bit more complete. As far as the overall level design, this game is very interesting, and you know what it reminds me of? Not that I'm an expert or anything, but it reminds me a bit of R-Type. The game feels a little bit like R-Type to me. Now, the core gameplay loop is a little bit different with the shields and everything like that, but at the same time, R-Type has that ball shield thing, right? And so I feel like this game is a pretty cool alternative to R-Type if you're an R-Type fan. Now, I would even go so far as to say that of the two games, the most recent R-Type Final 2 that I had a very lukewarm review of, to say the least, and this game, Schildmaid MX, between the two, I actually enjoyed playing Schildmaid more than playing R-Type, and I would even argue that it is the better of the two games as far as gameplay and everything like that. Now, the 3D graphics in R-Type Final 2, when they do look good, are pretty nice, but at the same time, I do like Schildmaid graphics quite a bit as well. I love the effects with the explosions and the lasers, and visually I actually do like Schildmaid a little bit more than R-Type Final 2. Feels a little bit more cared for, feels a little bit more developed. I'm making that point in case you are an R-Type fan and you want a game sort of in that vein. I think this would be a great choice to go with. Another aspect of the game that is interesting and definitely intentional, but is interesting, are the boss fights of the game. This game feels much more like an old school shmup than what I'm typically used to playing. Even though it has these elements that seem very bullet hell, like the fact that you're absorbing all these bullets and everything. Actually, if I were to say the feel of the game, it is more old school feeling, in my opinion, than bullet hell. Now, it is sort of a bit of a hybrid because of the mechanic. But overall, I would say, again, you don't need to be a bullet hell, Akai Katana, Pro Gear expert to enjoy the game. I think if you are more inclined towards stuff like R-Type, stuff like Gradius, I think this will be right up your alley, honestly. And so the boss fights in the game, like Gradius, like R-Type, are a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more simple. They kind of have one or two patterns that you need to figure out. Though the ones with the homing lasers are brutal, brutal boys. They are mean boys. So you got to be prepared for that. I think that's the main thing you need to watch out for just generally, are the homing lasers. Another thing you need to watch out for is when you're in your shield mode, you're absorbing all these bullets, but you cannot absorb the physical missiles. So that's sort of the point of the missiles. Another thing you need to watch out for, and again, this feels very R-Type and Gradius, is the background, are the walls and ceilings, because unlike Zero Ranger, you cannot fly into the walls and ceilings, you will die. So actually, my first playthrough, I ended up dying mostly to walls and ceilings rather than to enemy fire or enemy bullets. So just keep that in mind. It's not like a lot of new school shmups where you can ride along and grind against the floor and grind against the ceiling. No, they will kill you, just like an old school shmup. Another thing that's interesting about the game is the way it introduces itself to the player, because basically in order to unlock the arcade mode of the game, you need to go through and play the easy mode of the game, it seems, first. This is an interesting idea, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. Personally, I'd prefer just to go through and play the arcade mode of the game, but I will admit that playing through the easy mode of the game did sort of help me learn the mechanics, and I'm guessing that is the idea, where this game has unique mechanics, and so rather than throwing you in the deep end and you're not reading the tutorial and then you'll get destroyed, they're like, okay, we're going to throw you into this easy mode and you're going to have to actually pay attention to the mechanics, because what else are you going to do? So I do think it is an interesting choice to have you begin by playing the easy mode first before you can unlock the arcade mode. And I'm not entirely sure how that feels, because I'm not sure if that's a bad step first or a good step first. I'm a bit divided. I guess weigh in the comment section what you all think. So I guess we will see what method works the best. I'm not entirely sure, but I did want to comment on that because that was another interesting aspect of the game design that stood out to me as something you don't typically see in shmups. And I feel like what Schildmaid is trying to do is it's trying to bring new players into the genre. It does feel like that does seem to be a goal of the game. It does seem to be going out of its way to try and help you ease into the genre a bit, rather than just slapping you right in there like a lot of bullet hells and cave games do. So overall, I did enjoy the game a lot. I do prefer it over R-Type Final 2. I do think it is worth your time and interest, and it does seem to be catching on with a lot of people. Like, the patrons voted for it, and I've seen people on Discord and stuff talking about it. I do like the presentation, so it is a recommend from myself. But my critiques of the game are that I do wish it sort of figured out the aspect ratio a little bit more, because we're so zoomed out from the game and from the playfield that at times it feels a little bit less visceral and frenetic and powerful than something like a Death Smiles, where everything's just blowing up right in your face, or even Blazing Star, or even like old school R-Type. I do think that maybe making those sprites bigger, making the explosions bigger, zooming in a sense, even though the aspect ratio would remain 16:9, but like Battle Traverse does, I think that would be an interesting direction to go. And this isn't something that we're seeing commonly used yet, so the playbook is still up in the air whether this will be just how things are, or if it is a good idea to enlarge the sprites. weigh in on that. I'm not entirely sure, but I would like to see more shmups experiment with that. The other thing I definitely want to comment on is that barrel roll mechanic. I mentioned this earlier, but it's a cool idea. I love the idea, but I think it's just underdeveloped. I think if he did something else with that barrel roll, whether it's allowing you to get a little bit of invulnerability off it, or allowing you to like barrel roll through the laser beams, like through specific attacks, or maybe you could barrel roll across missiles. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, but I do feel like that barrel roll needs to justify its existence a little bit more. And then maybe one other idea that I had is, since this game doesn't have a whole lot of panic options, so it doesn't have a bomb, it has a shield, but you're sort of using your shield offensively most of the time. You're not saving the shield to defend yourself, you're using it as soon as possible, and you're always sort of like putting your foot on the gas. And so you can get yourself into some kind of ugly situations where a few wrong decisions, maybe you fly into the background and then you die, and then then you hit a difficult section. You actually can pile on the deaths pretty quickly. So another idea that I had is maybe he would want to introduce a little bit more of a generous extend system, because I do, just the way the game feels and the way the game plays, it kind of felt like wanted to give me more extends than it did. It felt like a more generous, maybe Zero Ranger-ish extend system might have fit with the game a little bit better. Maybe not if he buffs the barrel roll mechanic, but I think between the extend system and the barrel roll, there is a little bit more room for exploration. But overall, what really impressed me about Schildmaid MX is it felt like a very polished release. It didn't feel rushed. It felt like he went through and made sure all the little things that you need to be mindful of were there. It has a nice continue system. I really liked that. I liked that it didn't let you just credit spam, but it offered you a nice way to train and practice. I liked the stage select. I liked the leaderboards. That's very cool. So this is a very polished full feature release that I think is impressively done, and I do recommend it, and I hope you all enjoy it. Adios, everyone. Thank you to the $5 patrons: 100, Dingo, Another Joe, Anthony A, Aaron Iodice, Aaron Solus, Ben, Blur STG, Borgie 22, Brian Reboot, Brian Shiver, Bubblegum Crisis 1394, Chris Yuzefovich, Chronic Burnout 3, Corey Mark, Danielle Savage, Darren Griffin, Delta Tango 6, Disco Star Slayer, DJ 420, Praise It, Dubs, Entropy, Eric H, FCK, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Hausu, Ilya, Kiwi, JLab, JB RPG, Gymnacum, Joe Angelo, John Kelly, Gameboy Guru, K, K2, Kikoman 589, Larridge, Malaise, Mark Toms, Maz, Megadeth 859, Minong, Mechalin, Mitch LY, Queen Charlene, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Neon Dagger Games, Okla Googles, Philip Mason, Portal 63, Rattlecat, Raul, Real Skeen, Riff Mason, Scanline City, 7 Overdose, Shane Sinsiensky, SLW, Sniper's Paradise, The Boot Rex, The Real Ikuzo, The Dirty Screech, The Old Bensta, TRM Sugumo, Twilight EX, Plasmo, and Utskaya. Thanks for watching.